On behalf of the Harbaugh Coaching Academy, this is Lessons from the Sidelines, I should say. And we are very, very fortunate and honored to have just a tremendous all around basketball coach at every level, certainly at the highest level of the NBA, but you name it, junior high, high school, college, G League, European, NBA All Star, NBA Hall of Famers. Coach Tim Grgurich has touched their lives and touched their games to help make them better. And I know that I'm not going to be able to give him a lot of compliments on this podcast because he's not going to want to hear them from me because it could be 45 minutes of compliments. But we're going to get into a ton of what this is all about, which is lessons. And not only lessons that he's lived, but lessons that I think all of us as coaches, leaders, parents, you name it, there's things to take from this because when I think of Coach Grgurich, I think of fundamentals. I think of intensity. I think of doing your best no matter what. I think of showing up. And I think of no excuses. And there's a lot of things that fall under that. So, Coach, thank you for being with us. Welcome. And I want to go back. I don't want to go back all through life, but I want to go back to what so many people have heard about, maybe watched, but probably weren't fortunate enough to see on a basis of what really developed when you guys were together with Coach Jerry Tarkanian and Mark Warkentine and Cleveland Edwards and everybody at UNLV. How would you describe a UNLV practice when you guys were competing and winning championships like national championships?
Well, I think it all felt around Coach Tarkanian and Coach Tom. You know our background because you were at Michigan State. Michigan State and UNLV played all the time and competed. Uh, Coach Tarkanian was a player coach, and when the kids came there, they knew how hard it was going to be, and he never took any shortcuts. The practices were back then 4 hours, and it was work. And he believed in defense, and he believed in how hard the kids played. And if you didn't, then you wouldn't play. He would let you play offense and do whatever you want on offense. All the things they're doing right now on all levels, Coach Stark was doing back in the 80s and 90s, and even in the 70s with his ball clubs. He let them play. He wanted them to play. Gave them a whole lot of freedom. But on the other side of the ball, uh, there's a lot of discipline. Okay, and they had to perform on the other end as much as any team in the country.
You took players from, literally all over the country. I mean, the Larry Johnsons, the Stacey Augmans, the Greg Anthonys, Lloyd Daniels, so many different players that were a part of your group. What was it like trying to get guys to understand? They were competitors, obviously, and they had success. But what was it like getting them to understand and to play the level of defense and compete intensity wise day after day the way you guys were so famous for at UNLV, starting in the summertime, going in through the preseason, going into the season, and then obviously culminating with being a championship level team numerous times. What was that like?
I would say this. I know, Coach, all the coaches you named, Coach, we all came in 1980, 81, and they were just coming off probation or NCAA restrictions. And the culture kind of had disappeared from the 70s. The 70 teams to me were the best teams that Coach Tark had when they went to the Final Four. They scored in the hundreds, but they played defense, and that was lost until I would say 1982. Sid Green, Larry Anderson, that group of guys, when they came in, they were nothing happened for them the first couple of years. It wasn't until they were seniors, and I would say that group started everything again that was in the 70s, and said we're going to do it with either characters or character. Okay, because we had characters all over the place, and I would say those guys turned things around. They decided to do all the discipline things that coach wanted, and living there all summer long. Program in August and September before we started regular training camp. Very difficult. They had to be outside, and it was still in 100 degrees, and doing the running programs and the discipline program. So, those guys started it. They weren't sure because we hadn't had great success the 2 years before, and they went on to win 24 in a row, and that started the whole culture back again.
What made Coach Tarkanian such a legend? And I don't want to say he probably doesn't. He's a Hall of Famer, but I'm not sure he ever gets enough credit for just how great of an actual basketball coach and teacher he was. But if there's one thing that you could look back at and say that was so different about him from maybe some of the people you've seen in the past, but also very similar to you in the way you are with players, what separated him with the relationships with the players that he had that made him so revered by them?
Coach wasn't afraid to take shots with players, or whatever word you want to use, take gambles with players. And a lot of the kids came from really, really tough backgrounds, both on the West Coast kids and the East Coast kids. And he believed in them, and he stuck with them through all their faults or all their successes. And no one ever transferred. No one ever transferred. He never asked a player to leave the program, no matter what. You had to, when you came, you had to finish. And I'd say every kid, while we were there, they all finished. They all finished their 4 years or 2 years coming out of JC. And he lived by him, totally lived by him. Everybody had a lot to say about him. And he stuck up for him, and he believed in him. And I've not been around a man like him before. And some days we would all look at each other like, Coach, what are we going to do? He says, hey, we brought him here. We're sticking with him. They're not going anywhere, and neither are we. And somehow, some way, he had a way to do it, and we all believed in him.
So eventually, after UNLV, you go into the NBA. I mean, and you take really the way you've coached your entire life to the NBA into something that was really not as normalized in the NBA, and that was the innate drive to make players better individually and get them there. And obviously, you were with a tremendous coach in George Karl, and you had Bob Kloppenberg. I think Terry Stotts was young and beginning on that staff. But when you first got to the NBA and started working with Sean Kemp, Gary Payton, Detlef Schrempf, Eric Snow, a great success story for you, Nate McMillan, we can go right on down the line. Was it hard to get people to understand at the NBA level what they needed to get better at individually? Or was it just the fact that you were spending that time with them, making them better, that it just created an energy level for them to understand that this was really good for them?
Coach, the way I got into the NBA, I don't know whether anyone ever did it that way. We were expelled from college in the middle of 91, 92 season, and no one had jobs. And George Karl, Bob Whitsitt, Bob Kloppenberg invited me to come up to Seattle. March of George's first half season, because he just came out of Spain, and he was kind of like, I don't know what he was doing over there. He wasn't allowed to be in the NBA, I believe. Most people didn't want him in there. And if it wasn't for those three guys, I wouldn't have been had a job. I had no job, had no money, you know, kids at home, that type of stuff. So it was survival. For me, it was really survival. On Monday, I was on the bench at UNLV, and Wednesday, I was on the bench at Phoenix with the Seattle
Wow.
Supersonics.
Wow.
And
I didn't know that. I didn't know it was that
It was
quick.
unbelievable.
Wow.
And I'm like, George, what do I do? I don't know one player on the team. What do I do? He said, do what you did at UNLV. I said, "Man, you don't even know what we did at UNLV." But one day in college, the next day in the NBA, and I was scared to death. I'm like, what am I doing here? This is totally whatever. But
Who were some of the players? Who were some of the first players that were there when you got there?
coach, they were a great group of guys. They were tough, older guys, a lot different than now. Ricky Pierce, Eddie Johnson,
Ricky
Michael
Pierce.
Cage, uh, Sean Kemp was young, Gary Payton was young, Nate, Nate McMillan was very mature. He was still a young guy, but he was the hub of the team. Attitude, who he was as a young man, what he was all about. Uh, but I'm like, what am I doing here? What do I say to them? I'm sitting on a bench here looking at me. I'm looking at them. Derek McKee was the most funniest of the group from Alabama because Alabama was like UNLV back in the day. Their players were like our players. He kept looking at me, said, "Can't cheat here, coach. They don't cheat in the NBA." I said, "We didn't cheat at UNLV." He said, "Well, we didn't cheat at Alabama either." But, you know, the kind of players, they were so mature and grown up, older than they are now, and tougher, way a tougher group of guys. And I was there March, I don't know, March 10th or whatever it was, through the rest of the season, and we went to the second round of the playoffs. I don't know how that happened, but had to do with George, Bob Whitsitt, Bob Kloppenberg, and those kids. A lot. Sean and Gary were kids. They were trying to survive also. So it was a whole different thing, Coach.
There's so many things that go into learning. There's so many different ways to learn. But one thing that's always stood out to me with you and with other great coaches and what you really try to emulate when you're coming up is, and I wasn't always good at this early on, but I really learned a lot about this because I've seen you do it so long. You met players where they were, right? You met them where they were as people, you met them where they were as players, and then you took it from there. I think of Dave Duncan, the great pitching coach, played in the majors, and he was with Tony La Russa for a long time in St. Louis. And he had a great thing about bringing in pitchers. He might find somebody that had been injured, somebody that had been struggling, and he wasn't trying to get them to have 4 or 5 pitches right off the bat. He was trying to get them back to one thing that they could count on, one pitch that they could hang their hat on. Well, I think about you as a coach, and you meet players there like that. What advice would you give to young coaches that don't have the background in the classroom, that aren't coming up through high school, that aren't coming up as teachers, but how to really understand how to meet that player where they are so that you can help them grow into being what they can become? Is there any couple things that really stand out to you about that?
You know, the camp system back in the day was really, truly a great place for all of us to learn how to teach. You had the 5-star, you had the superstars out on the West Coast. You had camps on campuses, you had camps all over the place, and all the coaches would come and gather there in the summertime. You might have go to the University of Maryland when they had their great camp down there, and you might have 25 coaches there for a week that you would hang on to, talk to, spend the night with after the camp was over. And that was all across the country. You know what I'm talking about on that. And
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
everybody, you went to Bobby Knight's camp, or you went to this camp or that camp, and you would go to Pete Knowles' camp and you would gather with all the NBA guys, or you would come to our camp in Vegas back in 92 when it started. And we end up having like 50, 60 coaches there every summer. And we're sharing the court. We're all doing stations together. And no one's holding back. They're all coaching They're all telling kids what they need to do, and we're all trying to help each other. To me, that's the best information I can give to a kid who wants to come around. Hey, come to the camp. You're going to work a station with good people. You're going to work stations with players that you might not be able to handle or don't know how to handle. And you're going to watch someone else handle those players because they win games. Those players win games. Whatever you want to say about guys who are off center or whatever whatever word you want to use, you have to be able to handle those guys because they're going to win games for you, and you can learn to trust them, and they have to learn to trust you. If someone doesn't trust each other, you're not going to win a game.
No, I'm with you, and I think I watch this a lot. When you see other practices, and I know you and I've had this conversation, that there's not enough really teaching the young coaches how to coach, right, or what the responsibilities are, how to push and drive. And obviously, you're in a great spot right there with Jason Kidd because he's done a fantastic job. You've worked with some of the best, right? You are one of the best. But what advice would you give to the head coaches that get maybe frustrated with their staff or frustrated with their players about empowering them inside of their own program? Okay, so let's say the summer's gone and there's not a camp to go to, and yeah, we can watch video, yeah, we can watch YouTube and these different things, but I've got to get this group of coaches better right now as a head coach on my staff. Doesn't matter what sport. What advice would you give to them?
Well, all the sports have their own way of doing things. I've never been to the NFL mini camps that they have all through preparing for their training camp. Never been there, but I would assume they have 20 they bring in young coaches probably to help out, that type of thing. Uh, Baseball's the best with their minor league system. You were talking about the great pitching coach. You look at all the great coaches, a lot of them have come through the minor league system. And you have hitting coaches, pitching coaches, on down the line. The managers have to line the field back in the day. They had to learn how to get along with the grind crew on down the line. That's all part of coaching. I can remember being a freshman coach at Pitt, had no trainer. Uh, you had to drive your own vans. You had to tape the guys. You had to sweep the floor before practice. You had to get the towels. And to me, that's a discipline that we miss. We don't have to do anything now. All you do is show up. There's 20 trainers, and 10 weight training coaches, and on down the line. That's the way life is. Things have changed. First came into the NBA, there weren't any strength and conditioning coaches. I think Tim Grgurich, Bobby Medina, they were two of the first, and no one else. The trainers did it. The trainers were only one trainer. There weren't assistant trainers. And they would do the weight training. They would help out with the equipment, all that kind of things. And
Handle the money, handle the travel, handle the hotels,
they
all
were
that stuff,
important.
right?
They handled the per diem because the per diem was cash back then. That was huge. Okay, but those kind of little things that if you have a great trainer like we had in Seattle and UNLV, Jerry Kolosky, UNLV, and Frank Furtado at Seattle, you learn so much from those guys. They're in there.
Sure.
They're in there with the players every day. Players tell them everything. Tell them more than they're going to tell me. And if they're loyal, they can get over to you what that player is going through off the court, on the court, especially in the NBA. At UNLV, it was important too because the kids were, we almost lived like a pro player. We had apartments and they lived in a great city. So Jerry Kolosky was very, very important to us. Okay, so he knew what the kids were doing, where they were. Uh, that's all learning, Coach Solomon. We're
Yeah.
talking about
No, you're
we're
right. And
talking
that's
about
that's the
learning
epitome of
and
this
teaching. There's
Sure.
so many people to learn from, and in basketball right now, all the mini camps we have, uh,
Hmm.
summer league, the G League. I, if I if I had a program in the NBA, I would send one of my full-time assistants down to the G League for a week at a time. Send one coach down every week and just work with the coaches and
It's a
work
great
with the
point.
players.
That's a great point. That's a great point. And I want to ask you a couple more before we wrap up. And this has been great. When we just talked about all the people that are around, right? And there's so many people inside a NBA building or an NFL building, a college building, right? Let's go to the player. Let's go to that young player that's trying to get on the floor, that has scored and made baskets all his life, but maybe all of a sudden he's come into the NBA and he's got to figure out a way to play. And it's not just going to be about the scoring. It's going to be about the ball movement, the impacting the game on both ends, the rebounding, the hustle. What's some of the key things that you've used over a period of time to help players understand how to find a role when that role is not clear for them in their own mind?
Oh, one of the things I look at all the teams, you have to be with your own team to understand all those kids you have in your program and the coaches you have hired, the trainers you have hired, the veterans on your team, how good they are. Some veterans are way better teachers than we are, and some veterans aren't. Uh, Tyson Chandler right now is a great, great teacher. But I remember when he came in the league at 18 and 19, he needed all the teachings that he could get, everything that he could get. So every team, for example, we use our team. We have Cooper, and now you have about five other guys. We have a kid from Memphis, Musa, Cece. Okay, total opposites of where they are. Okay, then you have a kid like Brandon Williams who came. His career is like from the bottom up. And now he's on. Now
Exactly.
he might be he's in a very important position right now with all the injuries. And
And a year ago, he wasn't even a
no,
two-way,
no,
right, at
but
this point. So it's an amazing. No, that's what we're talking about.
and I think that I've got a lot of respect for Jason because I've known Jason since recruited him in high school. And Jason, like all of us, he had his ups and downs all over the place, and he kept coming and coming. And he feels all that right now. And I'm not worried. I'm sure there's 100 guys, NBA coaches in the past now, that have that same feel. They have a feel, and he just has a feel. For him to be able to do what he did with Kyrie and Luca and the staff, Sean, all your son, all the guys that were on that staff during that time. I say Sean because Sean, we go back.
Oh, absolutely. Sean Sweeney, for those that don't know, who's now in San Antonio, but just did a tremendous job. He's done a tremendous job in the NBA, and he certainly did a tremendous job at Dallas. And coach is also referencing our son Riley Crean, who's now starting his fourth year. But you're exactly right, and that's the thing I think is as we close this, that there's so many things we can talk about, and the way that you're a purist in the way that you can adjust. You can see people, you can meet them where they are. You see the good in people to try to bring out the great. But at the end of the day, you're always looking to make people better. And every coach has a responsibility, no matter if they're the head coach, the assistant coach, whatever it is. They have a responsibility to help bring greatness out of every player or bring a player closer to greatness every day. And Coach Gerg, that is exactly what you do, and it has been instrumental in a lot of lives, including mine. And
Coach,
I just
can
want to
I
close
can I
with
can I
thanking you.
interrupt you real quick?
Well, no, you don't like it. That's why I saved it for the end. I saved the
Can I
compliments for
can
the
I
end.
interrupt you for real quick?
Because if you hang up on
No,
me, then we're already
what
done.
you're all the things you just said is the world of coaching. everything you just brought up is the world of coaching and teaching. Okay, and I
Sure.
brought up Sean's name because he's very, very similar to Mike Brown. When I first met Mike Brown as a video coordinator, when I first met Sean, I was going to Milwaukee and he was with Jason over in New Jersey. Okay, and spent the summer with Sean, spent the summer with Mike. They're the same as players. You got to bring them along the same as you bring players along, and they're going to fight you just like a player fights you. They're going to like, oh my God, what does he know or what he doesn't know? And we're all the same as young coaches. Shit, I thought I was supposed to be a head coach when I was a freshman coach. Man, I can do that shit. Then when I got it, I'm like, God damn, you don't know anything. Excuse my language. I'm sorry. Okay, but
That's all right.
you finished
Podcast.
on a great note because that's who we are as coaches. Okay, I look at Lane Kiffin, his father, and I look at the gentleman who was at Pittsburgh Steelers. Those two defensive coaches, I admired them. I used to watch what they were doing to learn from them, and I don't know
Sure.
anything about football. So you learn the coaches have to learn also, same as the players.
Well, that's what this podcast is all about. The Harbaugh Coaching Academy is to try to branch this out. The last thing that this podcast will be is anything generic. It's going to all be about the truth of coaching, what it takes, whether it's players, whether it's coaches, whether it's leadership, those type of things that people can use in real time. And they're not always comfortable to use, but winning is really, really hard. And having success is really, really hard. And so you've got to do hard things and you've got to do them consistently. You got to do them well. And you can't get tired of the fundamentals. You can't get tired of getting better. And coach, that is exactly what you epitomize to me. You always have. And really appreciate you doing this. You're doing this. You're in Dallas. You're still a part of that staff. You're not there every day like the days before because you live in Vegas, but you're in Dallas right now. It's an off day in Dallas, and you're filming this with us from the Maverick offices. And I just really, really appreciate this. Appreciate what you mean to me, what you mean to my son, and certainly, I think I would speak on behalf of a whole bunch of people. What you mean to coaching, teaching, and not only in basketball, but coaching and teaching in life. So, thank you for doing this. Really, really appreciate it, and I think people are going to get a ton from this. So, thanks a lot, Coach Berg.